Hello and welcome from a scenic Nashville, Tennessee, down by the airport. I'm making a declaration. Georgia State football is unserious until further notice. Vanderbilt 70, Georgia State 21. This is the Thursday Night Postgame show after the conclusion of the Panthers' non-conference portion of their schedule, and the finale went about as poorly as it could have. Issues across the board, most notably special teams. The team gives up 70 points for the first time they've ever done that. Vandy scores 70 points for the first time since World War I. Was not something that I had on my bingo card for this game coming in. So there's a lot to unpack. Pull up the stats here just to kind of run through the basics. This is probably not the show that everyone's going to want the agonizing details on the numbers, but it is just worth putting them on the record. Vanderbilt outgains Georgia State 635 to 290. That's 349 through the air, 286 on the ground, whereas Georgia State's 290 is mostly through the air, 258 passing yards, 32 yards on the ground. Vanderbilt had 10 penalties for 99 yards and were the more disciplined team, as Georgia State once again had issues with the penalties. 15 of them for 109 yards, allowed Vanderbilt to convert 6 of their 10 third downs, allowed 8.9 yards play, 15.2 yards per completion, 7.7 yards per rush. I think that's about where you can end it there. Initial thoughts are not great, Bob. And like we had said going into the season, even I think when we did the vibe check, that it's like you might be 1-3 out of non-conference in a lot of outcomes. Like this was obviously going to be a tough matchup, but it did not need to be this bad. And the way it went bad and the things that were going wrong is the part that's concerning. Because even if you are outside the line, even if you lose by 40 something and you don't give up 70, even if this is, I don't know, like a 55-14 game, there's ways in which that feels less bad than this does, because the stuff that's going wrong is going to keep going wrong against no matter who they're playing on their schedule.
I think that's where I start. I had that comment that you just made about the vibe. I had that exact same comment like mentally yesterday. I was like, man, 1-3 was always there. It was always right there. You and I did not sugarcoat it when we were doing the vibe check. And I think it went sort of exactly how the 50% outcome went, So that's not to say that this was really a surprise, but I think the concerning thing is and I ask this rhetorically, what is good about this football team right now? There's not a lot, there's not a lot of individual good performances. And, I'll be able to do the research for the midweek, but my big homework piece is to find the last pair of Georgia State games in the same season where they had over 100 penalty yards in back-to-back weeks. It's little stuff, I think the only penalty that I can kind of excuse is the Kazi one, which his helmet came off. Like
I could do a thing about that. That's just a crap application of a crap rule.
Yeah, exactly.
Also,
they didn't... Go ahead.
The grounding, I think they got that wrong. Because there was one on Vanderbilt that they did not call that was very similar.
Correct.
I have a line about the penalties to get to later and something Del McGee said that questions where everyone's head is at and if everything's focused on the right thing. But we can leave that for later. But yeah, to your point, lots of them were just kind of like every time that Vandy sent more than 4 people on a blitz, there would be a holding. Special teams lining up wrong. You lose an onside kick that you get. That I don't think it necessarily had an outcome. I'd have to go back and check the play, but you pull a surprise onside kick and recover it, but there's an offside that negates it. And I don't think it was like the player who was offside is the one who recovered it. I think it was just like a guy at the end didn't do his job right there.
100% clean recovery if they're not offsides. Vandy touched it first.
Yeah, I mean, and you want to see stuff like that. And we talked about at the Ole Miss game, it's like it was disappointing that they kind of packed it in. They didn't do that in this game. I mean, everyone sort of did in the fourth quarter, started doing a lot of plays that were just going to keep the clock running, which great appreciator of that as it was getting later and later and the TV timeouts started to accrue. But, like, they went for it this game. They were pulling out surprise onside. They were going for it on fourth downs. Like, this wasn't a case of they made a tactical choice to let this get out of hand. It just got out of hand. I think rather than any kind of like good, bad, ugly, just probably phase by phase makes the most sense. Just kind of run through, and I mean the place you have to start is the special teams. We've already started to talk about it. It was just a mess in all phases. You have a blocked extra point, a blocked field goal, and a blocked punt. The punt being returned for a touchdown. Even as Georgia State's had some bad special teams, I don't believe there's been a game where they've had blocks in two phases of the kicking game in the same game, let alone all three. I would have to imagine this has been a very rare occurrence in this level of college football. Just it's a disaster. And it's not like this hasn't been coming. You know, there's been kicks blocked in the first few weeks. Just a lot of special teams issues cropping up that you would hope to get sorted, and the plan is not working. Whatever the plan is, whatever they're working and repping in practice, they're not getting it done. And if it's a case of like guys aren't repping their special teams stuff as hard as they are the regular reps, or they aren't playing on offense or defense, and so like they're annoyed by that and not doing the most on special teams, like that's a coaching issue, because you need to put the guys out there that are going to perform. You need the guys out there going to be able to do their assignments, and you got to tell them the right assignments, because clearly I think something is going wrong at the very fundamental of this stuff, because it's just been inexcusably bad.
And, you know, every week we get on here and we say, okay, you know, maybe this week they've repped it in practice. Maybe this week, you know, it'll get better. And I'm sorry. I think the frustrating thing is I'd have to go, you know, look at the individual scores for other Sunbelt schools versus, you know, some of these Power 5 or Power 4 opponents. But I just cannot imagine that Georgia State isn't on an island in how bad that one phase of the game is. You know, if you're going to go against the team, you know, where the long rush in the second half, let me figure out which one it was. That is fine.
David, I literally wrote this down. So I can't believe you also did the exact same thing. Like, that happens in these games. You'll give up a 60-yard rush. Like, everyone got blocked up, and they gave up a big chunk run.
Exactly.
That'll happen in these type of moments. That's what you can account for playing these type of games.
Exactly.
There's going to be an advantage where special teams, maybe they have some better players because their depth is better. That doesn't mean you just cannot block anything up or that you line up incorrectly. Like, that stuff is totally controllable, even in these games where you are at a talent disadvantage.
Yeah, talent is not lining up correctly. Talent is not, you know, I'm not going to pick on them for the defensive signals thing, whatever. It's just, there's just so many penalties where it's like, these are things that you talk about in training camp, and then they're not an issue for most of the season. Maybe you get like one of them. Georgia State's gotten like 3 of them in 4 games. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's so, like, I genuinely wonder what is going on during the week that we get to the Saturday and there's stuff like this. Because, like, I can't speak for you, but if they repeat that performance from Saturday, even if they repeat some of what they did against Murray State, I don't know how many games they're going to win in conference play. It's not going to be many, you know, and it's not just because of talent.
Right now, it's definitely not talent. Like, you've seen, like, they made plays. I guess the thing you asked earlier rhetorically, I think the passing game is pretty good. You know, not to divert too much, although I guess we kind of hit everything. The special teams, the outside, or the offsides on the onside.
The field goal was good. The hit the 50.
Well, the funny thing is we still don't know all we need to know about the kicking game because Braden McAllister was already the long guy. So, like, he'd hit a 50-yarder last year at Texas State. So it's kind of funny that it's like, you finally got one. Please clap. But also, like, you need to know if he hit the 31-yarder, not the 51-yarder.
Also
so
true.
That'll go on. He also gave up the long return on one of the kick returns after there was a penalty that moved the yardage back, which is a little bit on that being a 15-yarder for the roughing the passer penalty, and a little bit just like more issues on sound return coverage and all that. So the first play of the game, there was a formational issue. There was Camden Howard caught the ball, but I believe where he lined up, he was not a legal receiver. So he was illegal touching because he was covered up, all those rules that very few people think about, but it's why you always see like receivers motioning over to the referee to make sure they are in proper alignment. Scripted, you scripted the opening drives. I don't know, like every coach probably handles it a little bit different as far as like how literal it is and how deep it goes, but like you always go into the game with like your base plays you rep the most, the things you want to use to exploit the matchup. And then at that point, it's why the joke is like, great, that was the scripted drive, now let's see the unscripted stuff. The first play of the game, you have a formational mess up. And yeah, after the game, I asked Dell about it, and he said it was piss poor, lack of details, and wanted to put a lot of it on players taking ownership. And maybe there's a degree of that, where just guys not focused enough and just doesn't line up right. But that still goes back to, like, this stuff has been happening. Ted Hurst had a touchdown taken off the board for lining up the wrong place in the Memphis game. Like, I don't know how alarm bells hadn't already been ringing on this type of stuff, and I don't know how you don't get that message across. Like, ultimately, if whatever you've been saying on that stuff isn't working, you've got to change it as a staff, because we're 4 weeks into the season, and just the basics of the game are not going well. Even on the part of the ball that I think, if you looked at this game objectively, played the best of the three. It's a pretty low bar, but I thought the offense certainly had spots where they were moving it. Ended up being the TJ Finley show in the second half. Cam Brown got dinged, and they never went back to him. I don't know that it was like couldn't play, but just we're down a lot, don't risk his health type situation. But TJ was 22 35, 176, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and maybe like 1-2 balls that were even kind of in harm's way. He was basically kind of just taking what the defense gave him. Touchdown.
He was solid.
DJ Riles was good, right on the money, and like that moment for DJ, who's been working hard to move from quarterback, and we almost had it, David. I've been talking about it for 2 years on this pod. They ran the double pass for DJ Riles, and the reason we know it was set up is that Vandy committed holding on the play to prevent there being a downfield pass. But I saw him winding up. I was like, oh, that's number 10. It's happening.
As soon as he got it and he was coming to the broadcast near side, sideline, I was like, oh, this might be it. And then I looked and I was like, wait, there's too many people. There's not anybody in front of him. That is bad for what you want on this place. I couldn't see specifically, just because of where the camera was, but I was like, that's counting bodies. This isn't good. Somebody needs to be up there for there to be somebody open on the back end, and them committing holding is not a surprise. And you know what, Ted Hurst, I think I'm really happy for Ted Hurst. The line might not necessarily be, otherworldly, but I think that he himself played in a way that redeemed a lot of his poor performance versus Ole Miss. I don't know what the NFL scout situation is between the two games, but if you were an NFL scout, you probably saw this game and oh, okay, yes, this is not a guy who is just going to be running track or something on a football field like he was against Ole Miss. He made some good contested catches, got some guys off of him that I think are, larger cornerbacks, and I thought he played very well. And 71 yards, 7 catches. It was a good game for him.
Leo Blackburn finds the end zone again. Just all this is, I feel like, gravy for him. Him getting to actually get a chance at regular playing time after being just hobbled with injuries at Georgia Tech. So, again, a couple of guys getting touchdowns that you love to see the hard work paying off there. The flip side, if you're watching on YouTube, the running game, it's right there on screen. 32 yards, 20 carries. Even factoring in that there's some sacks there, just basically not a factor at all. You had a 20-yard rush by Rashad Amos mixed in there, so if you take that away, it's even worse. And, you can do the age-old, you need to commit to the run, but, I get why they went away from it. They were moving the ball in the air. They were chasing points as much as they're just trying to just keep the score looking as nice as possible, but it's if they had just done 3 yards, or tried to do 3 yards in the cloud of dust, it would have been 3 yards on the 3 downs total, and then you're punting. So it's there's a time to rep the run game, and certainly I think we've talked about it in past weeks. We thought the Murray State game was an opportunity to try and force the issue there a little bit more because the downfield stuff was going to work in that situation. But you didn't do that, and here it wouldn't have made sense because it just wasn't working at all. Had some nice stuff from Jordan Simmons on the touchdown drive. He ended up getting the receiving touchdown on out of the backfield. I believe that was the first touchdown drive in the first half. He had some nice, they ran some midline zone stuff with him and Cam, and he worked it to the outside. I think that's the operative word. When they've had run plays either designed to the outside or if the running back's been able to burst it to the outside, they've had some more success running around the tight ends and the tackles. When they've tried to get the interior run game going, it just hasn't done much. And this was a good defense, a good SEC team. It's just that the 191 you got against Ole Miss is starting to feel like much more of a mirage. And it didn't feel fake at the time. And also not feeling fake at the time for me, I really thought the defense had been taking strides, but they had a real just no-show in this one. I read the per play, per everything numbers earlier, just not very good. They just seemed tentative the entire night. They seemed like they were guessing between run and pass. They did not have good eye discipline. And Diego Pavia at quarterback was all about decision. He ends up 18 to 24 for 245 through the air with the single passing touchdown. He also led them with 86 rushing yards. There was no phase of Vandy's offense that this defense was able to take away. And I think we've seen they'll give up some yards, and it's kind of they did a good job when they got into good spots on the field against Murray State to just kind of clamp down. That's what this defense is going to have to do. And this game, they were 8 of 8 in the red zone, giving up touchdowns every single one of those times. I don't think that the goal for this team is to suddenly be the 85 Bears, but they've got to be better situationally when, you give a big chunk play up, Vandy is in the red zone, at least force a field goal attempt in one of these spots, and they just couldn't bow up in any of those situations. And so I don't really have any words to spin you on this one. It's we've got to see that this isn't the new normal. It's easy to overreact to one game, and so I try not to do that because I still think there were signs in the first 3 games with the defense, but we didn't see any of those in this game, and it's just not going well right now.
Yeah, and it's tough because I give Pavia credit. We talked about it at some point over the summer. Don't remember if it was specifically the vibe check, but you could tell that this game was very personal to Vandy, and I'm not egging anybody on when I say that or anything like that. Georgia State lives rent free in their head. No, it's not. It's not that. But they
took it seriously. They
did.
could tell immediately that they were locked in. Last year they have the strip sack on the first series and kind of set the tone in Georgia State's favor. Georgia State goes and kicks a field goal, but Vandy's like, all right, we're fine. Go down, march touchdown drive, and just kind of immediately had Georgia State all over the place. Misdirection was just kicking their butts.
Yeah, they couldn't find Pavia in an empty open field, and it's frustrating because I agree with you on the defense. I agree that I think that there's talent. There was a couple of plays that the secondary made that, did it stop Vanderbilt long term? No, but, you kind of look up and you're like, okay, I could squint and see how that could be a good, defensive play. Yeah, that's fine. It was a great play.
PBU with his helmet off. This is a stupid rule.
It is.
It is a rule that is halfway complete. Because the rule is once you lose your helmet, you can't compete in the play anymore. Makes sense because it's like, especially if you're in a scrum, like the worst thing you can do is like dive in head first and hurt yourself. Like I get why the rule exists. So on this play, it was like a goal line fade in the corner of the end zone. Kazi gets his helmet knocked off. I'm not sure there is not a penalty there for him losing his helmet. Clearly someone had to be around the face mask or something. Contacted the head, whatever. If by the rule, he has to just stop and let a touchdown happen there. You can understand why he's not going to do that. That's not how he's coached. And so I just don't understand exactly, like, it's not easy to just knock a helmet off. Like, I get that it's not something that you can really game all that well, but it's like, why wouldn't a receiver just try and do that? If they're going to get a free touchdown out of it, if the player either has to stop or, there'll be a free 15 anyway, just feels like an impossible rule, impossible situation to put a DB in. And so I don't know if you just kind of like, I don't know what the rule is, because then if the rule is like if your helmet gets taken off, like the receiver also has to stop, clearly that is also gameable the other way. It just feels like a really unfair situation, and the one positive is like I can't remember that ever happening in any game that I've watched before, Georgia State or otherwise, so you might not ever see it again, but I just wanted to flag up that it's like, what is the kid supposed to do in that situation? I mean...
Yeah, there's two issues with that play. Number one, let's say you're applying the rule correctly. A guy has to immediately stop playing as soon as his helmet comes off. Okay, fine. Removing how the helmet comes off, I'll come back to that in a second. The helmet came off literally 2 steps before he has to jump to try to prevent the touchdown. Like this, it's not like this guy has like a ton of time, to really set himself up for like, okay, I need to not do anything here. You know what I mean? Like the helmet comes off like while he's, doing his thing as a defensive back, and he sees that the ball is out. His field of vision is greatly increased, and he goes to make a play on the ball. Like that's totally fine. It's not like it was a complete split-second decision, but it was relatively close to a split-second decision. And then the second thing is, I've never played football. I'm a cop to that. I believe I've put a helmet on, but I couldn't tell you the last time I've done that. But I've watched a lot of football, and I know that those things snap on, right? I don't think he was running down the sidelines and decided to take his helmet off to try to see, could you, like, baseball players sometimes take their hats off, and they don't look weird, but, like, that's a thing that happens. Like, okay, cool. But, like, I've never seen a football player take their helmet off to play defense better. I don't think that they teach you how to do that in defensive back school. So clearly there must have been something that happened. And you saw that the helmet was off, but you didn't try to look into, like, okay, was there any sort of contact to the head that caused it to come off? Nobody saw that? Okay. All right. That seems like a really dumb application of the penalty.
I guess if it's in the middle area where, like, if the ball wasn't in the air, it can't be OPI. Illegal contact isn't a thing on offensive players, but if there's no way that can be penalized, I don't know what to say there. But kind of reminded me of back in Sunday Night Football when the Falcons played the Vikings, there was an offside Minnesota player who then forced the right tackle to commit holding. And it's like, well, why do you throw that flag for holding when the reason that he was holding was because the guy got a head start?
Exactly.
Sometimes penalty rules can get in the way of logic, and an unfortunate situation, obviously not detrimental to the outcome. Lots of other stuff went wrong first, which does bring me on to the post-game, and it's just something I needed to flag up just because in the moment I was like, I can't understand this answer, but Del McGee was asked about the penalties and just kind of like what needs to get cleaned up there, and he gave an answer. It was basically like, well, some of these penalties are subjective, and I'll pull up the quote to give posterity and give actually what he said, just in the interest of full disclosure and not putting words in anyone's mouth. As I trundle through my Twitter feed to find where that answer was at. It was very subjective. I felt like a lot of those penalties weren't warranted, and there were some penalties that weren't called during the game that probably should have been called. So I'll turn those penalties in to the officials' office, whatever. I'll let y'all know. I don't think that needs to be a priority after a game where he lost 70-21. I think we talked about just now the Kazi penalty. Don't understand how that was applied the way it was. The groundings, I think they got wrong. If one of them was not a grounding, the other one also was not a grounding. But I mean, there's about 20 things I'd put in front of that in the priorities list. And I'm not saying you want coaches to have their players back. You don't want them to just be constantly throwing them under the bus. But, like, this feels like a bridge too far in the excuse camp as far as, like, a lot of those penalties weren't subjective. There were some holds that came, like, immediately when pressure came for the offensive line. You're lining up wrong on offense and special teams. I just don't think that the delay of game thing is that subjective anymore. Like, you know that you can't do full line shifts at the same time. They're going to throw a flag for it. If the offense moves because you have your entire defensive line shift to a different gap, even if you're doing that not to catch them off guard, even if you're just doing that to make sure you're lined up properly, they're going to throw a flag on you for it. They're going to discuss it, and they're going to call it delay of game on you. So it's like, you've got to focus on cleaning that stuff up. Like, don't worry about what the officials' office has to say. Like, the conference office say, yeah, we got this one wrong and that one wrong. You still lost by 49 points. Like, that is the thing that concerns me, because it's like, what is this? Why is this something that feels worth singling out? Like, post games, ultimately, you're trying to get a message across to the fan base in a way. You're trying to talk to your players, although Dell doesn't do so much of, like, talking through the media to the players as other coaches tend to do. I don't know who that message is for. And if it's for the players, it worries me that it's like, that's still going to be an issue, because it's like, oh, it's subjective, don't worry about it. It's like, no, like, there's stuff to clean up on that for sure. Like, the operation was not clean basically in any phase of the game in this one.
You get to say stuff like that if you commit if your team commits 100 penalty yards in a game, and you know it's a complete aberration. Like the games before that, they might have 100 yards combined. You know, you don't really get to say stuff like that, even if it's true, because the frustrating thing, and me in agreement with your point, yes, some of the penalties are subjective. It's football, man. Like, penalties are always subjective. Some referee might see that holding up here is totally fine, and somebody might think that this is, you know, a terrible place for a lineman to hold. Yeah, okay, it's subjective sometimes. But, like, when your team is as penalized as Georgia State has been this season, I'm sorry, but you don't get to say stuff like this. You know, I went to check just because I was like, I feel like they have been one of the most penalized teams in the country, and they have. I'll wait until the stats refresh and some of the schools get separated, but I mean, they had 50 some odd penalty yards in the first 2 weeks against Ole Miss and Memphis. They had 100 last week against Murray State.
If you're
100 this
50
week.
Range, you're fine. Like, 50 is like, maybe there's some calls that you didn't love mixed in there. If you got 100, there's a lot of there that, like, you can't necessarily dispute. And the other thing is, you mentioned this being a week-by-week thing. Vandy is allowed to go, like, talk about points of emphasis before the game and say, hey, watch this. Certainly that's the thing in basketball, where officials will, like, talk with coaches and just kind of be like, hey, we think this guy's doing this a lot. Make sure you watch it. Like, they might have had their eyes up for some of this stuff, and it might not have been that hard to notice it.
I mean, it's not hard for us to notice it, and we're on the sidelines, you know?
Some of the thing with the, I guess, switching back to the defense for a moment, some of this is baked in almost because, you know, Chandler Jordan plays a lot at the nickel position, had a tough night. One of the guys whose eyes were really not in the right place a lot of times, giving up some big gains behind him as he is chasing his initial receiver, not looking back, seeing where the ball is. Keelan Butler also had one of those moments where he was covering someone downfield, didn't notice the wide receiver taking a underneath route behind him for like 26 yards. Common denominator there is those are two true freshmen who have been playing more and more, and certainly they're guys you can tell the staff likes and want to play. You do have to kind of take that as it comes with freshmen sometimes, that there's going to be some issues, and this just felt like a baptism by fire type of night for them, but it's like, you can do that, and you can try and emphasize, like, I'm sure Del McGee would say, like, this wasn't the year they're trying to be, like, the team, that they're still building, and they still feel like they need to build up, and certainly we'd all agree watching the first 4 games, but it's like, you've got to have this reach a certain level of acceptability. Like we were talking about with, yeah, you might give up some explosives. And, yeah, like you gave up a lot of points to Ole Miss this is a good Vandy team. They're top 25 for a reason. Teams in the SEC need to take them seriously. That doesn't mean you needed to give up this many points and have the ways that it was going wrong have it go wrong. I don't know how magical a bye week can be, but there's got to be stuff that comes into changes. The staff has got to attack it differently because clearly what they're preaching is not working for the games. And that's especially true in special teams. And you talked earlier about, what does conference play look like? It's just be competitive. I set the bar at the beginning of unserious until further notice. That could go away after the next game when they host James Madison to start Sunbelt play. If they even if they lose, but everything operationally is sound and it's just they get beat by a team that was picked first in the Sunbelt East. There's a way to lose and not send up alarm bells. This could have been an uneventful, or mostly uneventful, 45-13 loss. They could have played it within the number. If they play a lot cleaner. I'm not saying on the night it was anything close to that, but it's I don't think it's unreasonable to thought you could play this within 4 touchdowns. The line will be pretty extensive when Utah State heads to Vandy next Saturday, but I bet they'll give them a much better game. And they might even play within the line. And I guess you could say, yes, Vandy had a point to prove in this one, and Utah State didn't beat them last year, but Georgia State came into this one 1-2 with a lot of stuff that was going wrong. They had reasons to show up and want to play well too, not to mention the idea of pulling the double against an SEC team when you did it last year and they know you're coming this year. That would be a big win for this program. So it's you can't really sell me on it's not a one-sided who wants this more situation. Georgia State had reasons they needed to play better and showed that they could play better, and they weren't able to do it in this spot. And it kind of leaves you heading into bye week with a lot of questions and not feeling like this is trending in the right direction. If this never turns around, I will log this on record as the first time I had real wavering doubts that this was going to be a coaching staff that could get Georgia State where they need to be. I know that other people had worries before, and I don't want to say I calmed them down, but I needed more data. And this data is the most, there's so much red over all this data sheet. This is the biggest cause of concern that there has been so far. And you need only look at the final score to tell you that.
Yeah, I think a lot of where my head has been about this coaching staff has been a lot of, okay, the sample's not great. The sample size is not great. The sample size is not great.
The sample's not great and the sample size is not great.
Yeah, now it's just the sample isn't good. There are so many more negative entries than positive ones. It's starting to, you're starting to get enough data to say that something is at least not right. Fixable, perhaps. In my travels, I've seen some head coaches that their first couple of years at schools, legendary head coaches, their first couple of years at schools, at least record-wise, looked like this, but stuff is going to have to change, and arguably in a hurry for things to be where Georgia State needs them to be, because to be, just to be honest, I'll even be a little bit hard. I'll echo your not serious sentiments. They don't look like a football team. It doesn't look like a college football team to me. Not one that's capable of, week in, week out, inspiring confidence and a reason to keep track of them. Maybe harsh, but you got to look like a football team. So.
Yeah, I guess two things there. The first one being, I think, Frank Beamer is the obvious example of, if you look at his early years at Virginia Tech, he would not have been a long-tenured coach in modern-day football. He would have gotten fired way earlier. I think it was his 6th year that he had a winning season. But the other part to there is that's how college football was, and now how it is now, you're not guaranteed more than 2 years. Legitimately, I'm not doing the he's coaching for his job thing but if we get to the end of 2 years and they're another 3-9 or worse, which you'd take the or worse based on the way that this game went, certainly a possibility you only win one or not any more games the rest of the season. Tom Herman got fired after 2 years at FAU. You've seen it across the board. People were surprised when Trent Dilfer was not fired after 2 years at UAB, and that's probably coming this year. I think it's a live possibility that this is last year Del McGee and the staff are here, unless things get drastically better, because at a certain point you can just tell something's not working, and it's why delay the inevitable? You're going to get left behind. And so that gets into a whole different conversation of like, will this athletic director pull the trigger so early? I don't know. This is the person he hired, but I'm sure he can't be pleased. The other thing I wanted to just bring up as far as like how it looked is, hey, we were certainly people advocating that like you needed to see what you could do with a higher upside, and it felt like everything had been played out with Sean Elliott. But that type of game didn't happen under Sean Elliott, particularly with all of just the, like we've said, the special teams were not good in his tenure on balance. But you had really just the one game against South Carolina where you had the 2 block punts for touchdowns that, like, it really, really was that ugly. And you go back, they obviously beat Tennessee on the road in 2019. I don't know if anyone remembers that game. But, they almost beat Auburn. And that Brian Harsin-led Auburn team was considerably worse than this Vandy team, so it's not a fair comparison. But they were competitive and should have won that game. Even you go back to 2018, the worst year under Sean Elliott, they lose 41-7 at NC State. A 9-4 NC State team, which was 9-3 in the regular season, doesn't feel like that crazy of a comparison to this Vandy group. It was 41-7, and they were basically never going to win that game, but it was the normal kind of blowout loss. You didn't leave that game with extra concern. It was just kind of like, this game didn't go well, back to the drawing board, you'll get them next time. I mean, they didn't really. They only had one more win the rest of the year, but it didn't send alarm bells. If we'd been doing the podcast at that time, it was a year before our pod started, but I don't think it would have been much like, well, that didn't go great, clean up some stuff and move on. This wasn't that, and the Ole Miss wasn't that. You lose by 56 in that game when it was like a 34-ish line when the game started. Like, you brought in Del McGee because you thought he could take you to a higher level and build on what was already there. Because I don't think any of us ever indicated like the foundation wasn't at least solid here under Sean Elliott. It was just questions about how far the ceiling could rise. Now you're trying to get back to that original place where the floor is not in the basement, and the rest of the season is going to be kind of an indication of what Del McGee can do to get them there. And certainly how they look and how they come out 2 Saturdays from now against JMU is going to be a big indication as far as how much the team's got his message and is putting it out there and how much they're already starting to waver. And this is where you maybe start to have concerns about having a lot of portal guys come in, because you see it across the sport where just the school pride, the program pride that sometimes gets built over staying in program for 4 or 5 years isn't there with a lot of these guys. And so you worry about if they're one win in the middle of October, how much are they going to the whistle through the final games of the season? Certainly that'd be another real telling indication of just like, this is not working. But don't want to get too far ahead of myself there, but that is on my mind over the course of the rest of the season. Speaks to the level to how this 1-3 and how specifically they lost 3 games in their non-con looked and how the team performed. And so, yeah, there's concerns going forward, and it's risen to that level in my mind as I'm watching the final 8 games of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's unfair. I really don't. I thought it was a little premature after the Ole Miss game, but that was, a month ago, and arguably everything has gotten worse, and that's concerning. So
we'll keep monitoring the situation. Obviously, bye week coming up, so there'll be a show, maybe with a tinge more basketball, because there's less football. And I mean, I don't know what more football you want to hear. I can't imagine there's anything we will glean from looking over the stats the next few days that'll shed any more light on this game than we already did. But we'll keep across Georgia State sports. We'll try and find any hidden meanings in any of what's gone on in the first month of season for Georgia State football. But in the meantime, thank you for listening to this version of the Thursday night post-game show, and we'll catch you next time on the feed.